Okay, everybody, we're going to get going. It is 1:30. Oh, and just for Councillor Middleton Hope.
Why do you do that for him? I don't.
I was just trying to get their attention. All right, we will call us to order and start with a roll call, Mr. Westerson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deputy Mayor Middleton Hope.
Yes, present.
Councillor, Acting Mayor Parker, pardon me. I see him online. He unmuted. We didn't hear him, so.
Actually test to see if they were okay, were we?
Oh, I heard a brief thing. Can you hear us, Councillor Parker?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. We can hear you. Councillor Palladino?
Present.
And Councillor Croson.
I'm here too.
Excellent. And as you can see, we have Councillor Carlson's online. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel has also joined us. Thank you.
Perfect. We will go with the acknowledgement statement now. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. All right. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. It's a long agenda, so I hope everybody had a chance to read it. I have a motion from Acting Mayor Parker. Be it resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting of the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee of July 6, 2023 be adopted as presented. Councillor Parker.
Otherwise, if there's any additions or changes or anything, I would just call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Excellent. Moving now to our consent agenda. On the consent agenda are the minutes of our last meeting and the status of initiatives, and I have a motion from Councillor Palladino.
Sorry.
Be resolved that the minutes of Civic Works Standing Policy Committee held on June 1st, 2023 be approved and the Chair and City Clerk designate be authorized to sign the same, and further be it resolved that the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee receive as information the status of initiatives 07-06-2023. Councillor Palladino.
I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Excellent. Moves us then to presentations. And we have a presentation from Genesis Heavia-Oriel, Community Planner, and Ross Kilgore, Community Planner, on the Land Use Bylaw Renewal Project Update. I think you guys need to give all your stuff longer names. Welcome, Mr. Kilgore. The floor is yours, unless Ms. Gearing, you have anything you want to introduce, or Mr. Sanchez? Okay, and Mr. Kilgore, it's all yours.
Thank you, councillors. Next slide, please. So today we'll be giving you an update on this project, our first update of many. And so we'll run through what the purpose of the project is, where it came from, what it means for the community, how it aligns with our other strategic plans, the prior decisions of council that led us to this, and some details on the work undertaken already and what's to come. Next slide, please. So we thought it would be interesting to start off with just kind of looking back at our previous land use bylaws through the history of the city. So Lethbridge has had kind of proto-land use bylaws since Bylaw 83 in 1910, which was a bylaw of the City of Lethbridge respecting the erection and removal of buildings, fire limits, and prevention of fires. But really our first sort of zoning bylaws we know it today was in 1945 with Bylaw 895. And you can see really in this graph just how they tend to have increased in size over the years. And gotten more complex as well for people to navigate. That obviously leads to the need for people to reach out to city staff to help interpret those rules. So our current land use bylaw 6300 is actually, although it's only a couple of years old, it's built on a foundation of updates that stretch back really to land use bylaw 4100, which was first adopted in 1986. And so this project really is the first time since the 80s that we've taken a completely fresh look at the land use bylaw and kind of a holistic approach to rethinking the role of that bylaw from scratch. So how can we make the new land use bylaw more user-friendly, easier to understand? And that can also help to potentially cut down on staff resourcing and time for things like helping people to interpret the rules on relatively simple projects. Next slide, please. So it's important to recognise that the land use bylaw is really a regulatory system. It has a huge influence, of course, on Lethbridge's built environment as it exists today, and through the previous land use bylaws over the past decades. So any system will create intended and unintended results. And so this quote here really resonated with us. the current land use bylaw is perfectly designed to give us the built environment that we have in Lethbridge today. And of course, there's lots of good aspects to that we want to retain, and also some known issues that we want to improve upon with the new land use bylaw. The diagram really envisages the land use bylaw as that system where the roots are kind of the inputs or the regulations in the bylaw, and what we see above ground, what the public see is kind of the end results of those regulations. And so the ones that are shown here, the outcomes here on the leaves, are really all pretty positive, but of course there are some of those issues that we want to improve upon. So this project really allows us to rethink the land use bylaw's function and how it can deliver the types of place that Lethbridge residents want to see, and that's what we'll be finding out from them through the engagement. Next slide, please. So there's lots of exciting potential through this project to tackle some really big issues, such as, for example, housing affordability, which is becoming a bigger issue in Lethbridge. For example, the rental cost for a one-bedroom apartment here has increased 36% in the last 4 years, and now costs slightly more than a similar apartment in Edmonton. Housing affordability directly affects people like students, young people buying their first home, single parents, immigrants, and seniors, and so on. But it also negatively affects the whole of our society, for example, through being able to spend your money on things other than housing, like other businesses and so on. The more housing costs go up, the less there is left over. So the land use bylaw has a big effect on housing affordability and choice through regulations like minimum lot sizes. If you can't make a smaller lot, you're paying for that same amount of land no matter what you build. Maximum densities, making the most of the available land, housing types that are allowed or not allowed in different districts, and so on. And then looking at social issues, from 2019 to 2022, so over that 4-year period, there were 16 rezoning applications that involved social uses, and of those, only 2 were approved. So we currently have issues where it's hard to get social uses, approved. So there's maybe an opportunity with this project as well to rework some of these rules to make it easier to provide some of the essential uses that we need, while also addressing community concerns and finding ways to alleviate those. And then for businesses, there's an opportunity here to make changes to the land use bylaw that can make it easier for businesses, cutting red tape. So for example, more broad use definitions would cut down on the need to apply for change of use applications. And then more broad land use districts with more allowable uses can remove the need for rezonings, which can be a lengthy and costly process with uncertainty. Particularly direct control rezonings, we've seen in the last couple of years that actually the majority of rezonings are to direct control districts. And the land use bylaw can also contribute to sustainable development, so it can make it easier to build more traditional forms of urban environment that tend to be more walkable with a mix of uses and housing forms. And then through extensive public engagement over the next 18 months or so, we'll be finding out from the community what they'd like to improve about our current urban environment, and figuring out how we can help them realize that through the regulations in the new land use bylaw. Next slide, please. So this diagram just places the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw within that hierarchy of legislation and regional plans down to the municipal level. So we can see here that the land use bylaw is the tool or the instrument that implements the policies in the municipal development plan. And there are several policies and directions in the MDP that specifically call for updates to the land use bylaw. So this approach of this project is to really address all of those in a holistic way, so we're avoiding engagement fatigue and going back to the public over and over on individual issues. Next slide, please. So these are the 6 MDP outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And the land use bylaw can help deliver these. Some of them are more obvious, like a well-designed city, but also the land use bylaw can help to contribute to things like environmentally responsible city, economically prosperous city, in some of the ways that I discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of decisions from council that have contributed to this project. So the first one here was the decision, or the direction rather, to staff to address social uses and talk to the public and come back with recommendations on changes to our current land use bylaw. So that will form phase 1 of the project. And next slide, please. The other contributing decision is the budget initiative approval, which really deals with the project as a whole, with the creation of the new land use bylaw. So that will really kick off in phase 2 of the project. But Genesis will now run through some more details of the overall phasing of the project for you.
Thank you, Ross. Next slide, please. So over the next few years, we'll be delivering this project in 4 phases. The first phase will focus on the delivery of social use engagement, as well as the development of potential amendments to the existing land use bylaw 6300. The second phase will focus on delivering general land use bylaw content engagement. This could include things like parking requirements, land uses, land use districts, and many other aspects, including the structure and usability of the document. Along with this, we'll also be conducting research to learn how other cities have been successful in this work. The third phase will be led by legal services, and they will be working on the writing of the new land use bylaw. Their writing will be based on best practices as well as legislative requirements and community engagement delivered in previous phases. The last phase, phase 4, will be dedicated to reviewing the new land use bylaw, and this review will be completed by the public, internal and external stakeholders, as well as City Council. Based on the length of the components and realizing that engagement sometimes needs to be adapted to meet the needs of the community, we recognize that we'll need to be flexible in the engagement phases. Next slide. We've also put together a project team, as listed here, to ensure we have the required expertise throughout the delivery of this project. There are 4 areas of expertise. One is planning and development, legal services, as well as community engagement and communications. We also have a GIS technician to help us with any mapping and data analysis. Next slide. So up to this point, we've completed a few key items that will set the stage for the future of this project. First, we've completed the project charter, which establishes what we hope to accomplish and how to ensure we stay on track and that we're in alignment with Council's original ask. Realizing that this project will impact our community significantly, we've also prepared a public-facing document that we've called the Project Primer. This explains to the public why we're undertaking this project, what the land use bylaw is, and what they can expect throughout this project. We hope that this is the first of many documents that highlights or that provides transparency to the public throughout this project. We've also reviewed the engagement needs that we'll have throughout this project, and based on that, we've secured an engagement consultant to help us deliver this work. As in preparation for upcoming engagement related to social uses, we're working on background research to ensure staff is prepared to have the conversations we will be having with the public, and also to learn how other cities have been successful in addressing social issues. Next slide. As mentioned, we've secured an engagement consultant. We have selected Green Space Alliance, who is collaborating with Populous Community Planning and Glennis Buffalo Consulting. Both Green Space Alliance and Populous Community Planning have collaborated for over 14 years, and they have an extensive portfolio in delivering projects throughout Alberta, ranging from small municipalities like hamlets and towns to larger cities. They excel at delivering engagement programs for technical documents. This includes navigating difficult conversations with the public and then producing documents that are technically sound and reflect the engagement feedback received. They're also highly skilled in other planning disciplines, including policy planning and urban design. And most recently, they've completed work for the City of Edmonton related to their zoning bylaw. I encourage you to view this presentation online and have a look at all the links we've included here to see some of the work they've completed. Next slide. So in terms of next steps and what you can expect, we are working on the engagement strategy. This should be finalized in the next few weeks. We hope to deliver engagement maybe at the end of July, but definitely the remaining months of the summer, as well as in September. We will be back to council, whether it's an SPC or city council, depending on submission timelines, with an update on the engagement we've completed and the results that we've gathered. Following this, we will be back with a set of proposed amendments that relate to social uses for the existing land use bylaw. Next slide. So this slide is not as relevant anymore in that at the time of the planning department preparing this presentation, we had the recommendation to ask council to change the date that was stated for us to come back with the land use bylaw amendments. However, on June 13th, as part of the consent agenda, council deferred the date for our return with those amendments from Q3 of 2023 to Q1 of 2024. So based on that, our recommendation today is for you to receive this presentation as information. Next slide. This concludes our presentation. We're both happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you both for the presentation. I know the public will probably start getting more interested once they start seeing what changes are actually recommended. Right now, it's sort of very large project, but we'll see what questions we have. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of observations as well as some questions. I note that you have 6 MDP outcomes: economically prosperous city, healthy and diverse, culturally vibrant, well-designed, environmentally responsible, supports the region. What I don't see in here, and I think is of equal importance, if not greater importance in some people's minds, would be crime prevention through environmental design assessments as part of the planning process. So I would encourage that to be an engaging piece as we move forward. Every time we are looking at whether we're going to rezone or whether we're going to replan, there needs to be an assessment and it's not a complex process, but we need to have an assessment done to ensure that it's compatible with some of the other outcomes that we're suggesting here. I would like to comment on the buffer zone, and I'd like administration to give some thought to increasing the buffer zone from 60 meters. We have, as members of council, received feedback from businesses and the public that have often indicated that the buffer zone of 60 meters is somewhat inflexible and does not appear to accurately reflect the area in which people should be consulted on some of the projects. So I'm suggesting perhaps a minimum of 60 meters be included in the language and provide for opportunities for administrative staff to conduct reviews in a much broader perspective, perhaps up to 150 meters. So here's my first question then. Is there a red tape reduction component to help applicants negotiate the process? As businesses continuously talk in terms of how at times it is either complex or difficult to move through a process. Other cities and certainly the provincial government have gone to a red tape reduction component. I'm wondering if that's something that we're thinking about doing to facilitate development rather than frustrate developers.
The Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question, and I've noted your points there as well on the notification distance. So certainly red tape reduction is one of the central aims that we're taking into account here that we'd like to achieve, and so that'll be certainly a part of engagement throughout the project, figuring out ways that we can cut down on any onerous requirements for businesses as well as individuals. But certainly we'll need to figure out what appetite there is among the public for that as well, and hear from everyone.
Okay.
Yes,
Sanchez, you want to add to that?
I want to add a little bit too, and I have been working. This project is one that I know Mrs. Gering's team has been putting a lot of time, and even myself, because I want to work with them. And it's a learning opportunity for all of us, and also learning from other areas. And I want to mention that part of the idea of reviewing the land use bylaw too is that maybe there will be consolidations of districts or areas or zones types that we have. So that could be a part of a red tape reduction area, because now you don't need to rezone if those are combined into one. So there will be that opportunity. And on top of that, I know the team is also looking at the work that has been done in Edmonton and other places where you can actually do some of the applications online. So make the process more efficient, more easy to do for those applicants, and those opportunities are going to be part of the work that we're going to be doing.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Now I'll move on to the next component. As part of community engagement, have you considered a cross-functional approach that would specifically engage developers, builders, and real estate representatives to participate in discussions and to include their expectations in any of these changes? You talk in terms of the public, perhaps defining what the public or how you view the public might assist in that, but I would certainly encourage you to engage those people that are actively involved in requesting those kinds of changes to land use and so forth, that are actively involved in the development of property.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, identifying the key stakeholders is part of creating the engagement strategy, and we'll take that under advisement.
Okay, and then lastly, does the public, other than those mentioned above, engage in or understand the process? And so an educational component is going to be critical to help facilitate how they would negotiate, not only interacting with the city at some point, but to engage in a process of dialogue around providing their feedback to us so that we can consider it as we move forward with the bylaw.
Councillor, yes, absolutely. One of the main aims that we had for the engagement, which we incorporated into the request for proposals for the engagement consultant, was that we really want to ensure that we're hearing from the full range of voices in Lethbridge, making sure that we give everyone a chance to be heard. So we're not just kind of doing the usual process and whoever shows up we hear from, but we want to try and actively outreach as much as we can, so that we can ensure that we're taking everyone's views into account and incorporating those into the recommended changes.
Thank you. Just please consider those comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Palladino?
Chair, I have some comments too, more general in nature than John's were. I have complete confidence in the team you've assembled, by the way. I think this is a good way to go. Hiring a communication consultant, I was going to ask you if a planning consultant was also in the books, but you're saying this team that I saw up there are both communication consultants and planners as well, correct?
That's correct. So we have hired consultants to deliver the engagement. It is an extreme value that they also deliver planning work and are planning experts.
Thank you. And another comment I had was on the comment question. The creation of the project primer, which is as I understand it, a document. First of all, it's too long. It's 16 pages, and I'm afraid you're going to lose, for the general public, a lot of people that'll get through the first 4 pages of it and then just wane off. So I guess it's a comment more than a question. Can you trim it down? Yeah, but it's a good idea though, because you're getting the information up front and then. Thanks.
Questions, Councillor Palladino? Okay, you're doing some public engagement this summer, July to September. Do you have any concerns, or do your consultants have any concerns of doing it in that time span? Because we know July, August, September, we sometimes have difficulty getting people. Have they got a way of modifying it to make sure they can get the right people with vacations, with, people getting back to school, et cetera, et cetera? Have they considered that in their approach? Because I know if we put something out in December, people complain they lost it in Christmas. If we put it out in the summer, we have concerns about that. So what's the plan for making sure that you don't lose people in those 3 months?
We'll definitely consider how to reach the most people and the right people during that time span. Initially, we had allocated engagement for the summer months to meet council's original timeline. However, we extended it into September. Again, engagement has to be reactive sometimes, and we'll reassess throughout to ensure we have spoken and reached the right people. At this time, we're still developing that strategy, but we'll definitely consider that. Thank you.
One of those things. I can understand where Councillor Palladino was coming from with the primer. A lot of people, 1 or 2 page document will be as much as they'll read, but I also appreciate that it's been done, because I know one of the things when I talk to people about, we're going to go through a land use bylaw review, a lot of people don't understand what zoning is. They think zoning is planning, and they think the two are identical, or they so congratulations for at least creating it, because I think it is a document that we can use when we're talking to the public, that I hope the public will actually make use of, because it goes through the project, and I agree it provides some transparency. Now, Mr. Kilgore, I had to sort of smile when you mentioned Bylaw 83, because of course you gave it its proper title, but Bylaw 83 is also the bylaw that helped to create Chinatown. Because even though the purpose was all this grand thing about we're going to make sure all these things happen, by worrying about where water would be and where laundries could be, they could force the Chinese laundries into a certain area of town. So something that was a planning document became a very political document. And I know you and I have had this conversation that zoning is political. Like it is, even if people think it's a simple document. So as you're going through, what are your plans over the next few years as you guys are doing this to consider those, not just the social issues, but consider the long-term impact of any document we come up with in the end? And this may be more of an esoteric question at this point, but I think we all know that zoning originated to try to keep certain groups of people out of other areas of town, and to so it has always had a political aspect to it. So how are we going to try to do zoning in a way that makes it the best for everyone in Lethbridge?
Thank you, Councillor. Great question. Certainly, my background and where I studied planning originally was, the UK doesn't have a zoning system, so there are certainly ways to do urban development and regulation without zoning at all. And some people nowadays call for the abolition of zoning completely because of concerns like that, and there are other ways to regulate these things. Certainly the province requires every municipality to have a land use bylaw, but that's, it's kind of how long is a piece of string. There's so many different ways you could do that, and so really to try and make sure that it's always going to be political, as you say, but to try and make sure that it's done in a way that people are comfortable with. I think we just have to try and do that through engagement and making sure that we're hearing from all voices, and not kind of creating a land use bylaw that serves one segment of the population but not another. So that's certainly going to be an ongoing concern that we're going to have to keep in mind throughout the project.
And when you were hiring your consultants, is this a question that was ever raised to them? Like, do they have the background in your mind from enough communities to be aware of these issues?
Yes, this is part of our RFP. We highlighted the need to have representative engagement throughout. We recognize the value of bringing you a robust engagement summary that gives you a sense of the feedback that is out there in the community, not just people who show up to speak with you directly. So that was one of our priorities.
Mr. Sanchez?
Just want to make a comment too, and is make clear on the expectations. And at least for myself, I have seen that things are changing at a really fast pace over the last 10 years. This bylaw has been in place for over 40 years, but in the last 5 years, there is new technology, new changes, new type of business. So even though we're doing the bylaw review right now, we took out 40 years, but it might take only 5 years or 10 years to now do another update. So we will need to be reacting to those changes and make sure we incorporate what is happening in the community. So this will be the first major, but we will be doing changes as they come because things are changing us faster than what we can sometimes keep up with.
So the idea is to make this a living document reflective of changes. Okay. Deputy Mayor Middleton Hope?
Thank you. Just a request of our presenters. Will council be invited to attend some of these engagement sessions? And if you had planned that, please ensure that it goes through our staff to make sure that it gets put into our calendars so we can attend and at least listen, if not participate in some of the discussions. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you.
Okay, the queue is now empty. Online, Councillor Parker, Councillor Carlson. I shouldn't ask Councillor Carlson, what was I thinking?
So I'm good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the questions and the presentation.
Okay, Councillor Carlson?
I'm good too. I won't keep you any longer, I promise.
All right. So we are accepting this as information, and we know we'll be getting several of these updates over the next couple of years and throughout the process. So if the questions are done at this time, we will move to the motion, and I do have a motion by Acting Mayor Parker. Be it resolved, the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee recommends Council receive the report for information. Councillor Parker.
Much. I know this is a start of a long actually it's not the start, it's the first presentation or update to us, but a lot of this work has started a while back, and I appreciate the updates. I appreciate that council will have the opportunity to be part of the open houses and part of the consultation as well, which is good, and I appreciate the comments of Deputy Mayor on that. So otherwise, I would just call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? That passes unanimously. And as everybody knows, we are now adjourned, but we were adjourned till October, unless we have a special meeting. So, yeah, see you all in a couple of months. All right. Thank you to the team who presented today.
Have a great summer. Thank you.
And yeah, have a good summer.